you please welcome to the Mystery Box Show stage, Allison Moon!
I've been a sex educator for 15 years now. And in that time, I've gotten pretty comfortable getting on stage in front of a paying audience and riffing about anal or fisting or anal fisting without too much anxiety. But of course, I wasn't always like that. In fact, in the early days, I was pretty easy to ruffle. Like, for instance, my 4th workshop ever. I was on a self-funded book tour, celebrating the release of my very first novel. And I don't know if you know this, but self-published novels about lesbian werewolves. Thank you, but not the big money makers that I was led to believe. I know, no one is more disappointed about it than I. But I quickly discovered that if I taught a sex education workshop at a sex toy store in the city that I was in, I would usually make just enough money to make it to the next city. Which is how I found myself in Vancouver, in a sex toy store, teaching a workshop about strap-ons. Now, originally I had pitched her Girl Sex 101, which at the time was my signature workshop. But the owner of the store said that her clientele preferred more specific activity-based workshops. And so I just kind of panicked and grabbed strap-on sex. And even though I had no outline and had never taught the workshop before. But at that point, I had spent a decent amount of time with a dildo strapped over my mound. So I figured I'd have something to share with the audience. But when the day of the workshop came, I just got completely blindsided by imposter syndrome. I was worried that everyone would think that I was just like a marketing pitch for expensive harnesses and dildos, or that I would mismanage my time and spend all my time talking about vaginas and have no time left over for anuses, because as we all know, you can go from vagina to anus. But you cannot go from anus to vagina. As people started wandering into the store, deciding which hard metal folding chair to choose, I felt the back of my neck get hot. I started rearranging my props. I asked for a whiteboard and then got rid of the whiteboard and then asked for the whiteboard again. I was thinking, should I sit or should I stand? Should I just launch in or should I hold for a couple minutes for latecomers? Finally, just in a burst of anxiety, I just start. Hello, my name is Allison Moon. I'm a sex educator. I'm here to teach you how to strap it on. And the audience was a little taken aback. See, when I get nervous, I tend to speak very quickly. So, I took a deep breath. And then I invited everyone in the room to share why they were there, which is a great technique as an educator. Get yourself out of your head and into the room with the people, listening to their actual needs. And one by one they shared, and I started to calm down because I recognized these people. These were the people who came to my workshops. There was the lesbian couple celebrating their 3-week anniversary. You know who you are. There was the pro-dominatrix who was there to expand her menu of service options. There was the group of giggly, giddy queers who were probably also a little drunk. There was a middle-aged heterosexual couple who had met on OkCupid after their individual terrible divorces, who were there to learn to reclaim their sexual renaissance together. Yeah. Now, teaching in front of men, I realized in that moment, was actually new, as was teaching without a demo model. See, up until that point, I had taught all of my workshops at private parties, sex parties, or Burning Man, where I had the privilege of having a human being next to me upon whom I could demonstrate some of the techniques. As a kinesthetic learner myself, this is my preferred way of teaching because it's always entertaining and educational, even when words fail. And I'm only now realizing this as I am standing in front of a mixed gender audience, fully clothed, with no body next to me to help. And I start to feel a little nervous again. Finally, everyone is done sharing except for one man who has planted himself front row center, like less than 4 feet away from me. He is old, very old, late 80s, early 90s maybe. And everyone turns to look at him when it's his turn to share, and he doesn't move a muscle. He just stares straight at me with this gentle but slightly disconcerting smile on his face. Okay, let's get started. Harnesses. So there's the one strap, also known as the thong style. There's the two strap, aka the jock strap style. And then there's the underwear style. Pros and cons of each style. Here we go. And I start getting into my groove. People are leaning forward, they're laughing at my jokes, people are taking notes. Good job, lesbians. The straight couple I can already tell is going to spend a lot of money on sex toys tonight. And I'm good. I'm talking lube, I'm talking dildos, I'm talking harnesses, everything's going well. And then the guy falls asleep. I mean, okay, he's old, but like, who the fuck is this guy? Did he just wander in off the street? All right, okay, so, sorry, yeah, where was I? Materials, dildo materials. So silicone is considered the gold standard of dildo materials. It is non-porous, and you can throw it in the dishwasher or even boil it to clean. And now he's snoring. And I am having a hard time with this. Okay, so, there are other materials also like hard plastic or Pyrex or even wood. Nothing. He is just sawing logs through my entire workshop, every once in a while stirring to consciousness and then drifting off again. I am doing my best to get this ship righted, but the audience can tell I am agitated. Nothing is working. I just bear down and muscle through. I get a couple laughs. I share some insights. I answer questions. And at 90 minutes, thank you and good night. After the workshop, everyone is milling around the store. I'm signing books, I'm answering private questions, I'm helping people choose toys. I was totally right about that straight couple. Holy shit, they bought some cool stuff. And then one by one, they leave. The owner gives me my check and then takes the rack of folding chairs out back to stow away. And I'm left alone in the store, feeling like a failure. And I am trying to decompress, and I'm putting away all my gear, and that's when I see him. The man, the old man, the completely out-of-place man. He is standing in the corner, staring at me with that same disconcerting grin. And now I notice that he is holding a bag, a brown paper lunch bag, just curled in two fists in front of his chest like a child. Now, at this point, I already kind of hate this guy. He practically ruined my entire workshop, but now I'm kind of afraid of him. What's in the bag? And why did he wait for me to be completely alone in the store? He sees me look at him, and he takes that as an invitation to shuffle towards me. And then I get a better look at him. I see that he is smaller than I thought. He is skinny and stooped, wearing this gray pea coat just hanging off his small frame. And I introduce myself, force a smile, and he introduces himself as Peter from London, and he very much enjoyed my workshop. And in my mind, I scoff, how could you? You weren't even conscious for any of it. But I force a smile and thank him, and he asks me if I wouldn't mind terribly if he showed me something. Okay, sure. And that's when he opens the bag and holds it out in front of me. And I peer inside, and nestled at the bottom like a broody squirrel is a strap-on. But it's not like any strap-on I've ever seen before, certainly not like anything hanging on the walls of this sex toy store. And I look at him, and he smiles, and he asks if I'd like to examine it closer, and I nod. He reaches inside and hands it to me with as much care and intensity as if he were handing me a Fabergé egg. I take it, and I hold it up to the light, examining it. The dildo is hard rubber, hollow, pink, modeled after a realistic penis with a tendon and veins and a clear corona. The rubber is shiny, worn smooth. The harness is less recognizable. It's these thin, elastic straps, like an ancient menstrual belt or like a bra from generations ago. There's no stretch left in the straps, and they are worn gray with age. I'm holding it and start to stumble a question. Where did you? But I don't know what to ask. Peter graciously lets me off the hook by telling me his story. He was stationed in Lyon during the war. Alone and terrified in a foreign Nazi-occupied city. He didn't get along well with his fellow soldiers. But every once in a while, when he had a little money in his pocket and an evening to himself, he would walk clear across the city to a brothel to visit Jacqueline. And this, he said, was the strap-on that she used with him every time. This, I said, holding it higher to make sure I understood, and he nodded and continued. He was in love with Jacqueline, truly. She saw him, she understood him, she showed him pleasure like he'd never known before, like he never even knew was possible. But after the war, he'd never see her again. He returned to London, he married, he had children, and eventually emigrated to Canada. 5 years prior to that night that I met him, his wife had died. I started another question. Did you? And he cut me off. He never told his wife about it. She didn't know he liked it. She didn't know he had it. He never mentioned or even hinted at wanting her to wear one with him. And answering my next unspoken question, he said, I wonder if I should have told her. I don't think she would have understood. But now I suppose I'll never know. That moment hung heavy in the air between us. This man that I wanted to kick out 20 minutes ago. Now this precious, vulnerable human being sharing something with me, a stranger. He never even showed his wife. I handed him back this precious object, and he placed it back in the bag, and now overcome with a certain kind of anxiety of his own, he started curling the paper in his fists. His eyes left mine and started searching the carpeting in front of him. The next thing he said to me was in the general direction of the floor. I saw this workshop, and I thought, if anyone would understand me, if anyone could see me the way that Jacqueline saw me, it would be you. And in that moment, I did. He transformed from a 90-year-old in the middle of a sex toy store in the middle of the night to a soldier, frightened, terrified, really. Horny, different. I leaned down to catch his eye, and I noticed that they were red and misty, and I started welling up myself, and I said, Peter, I am so glad you showed this to me, and I am so glad you came tonight. And he just said, one syllable, transforming him from an 18-year-old back into a 90-year-old. And because he was being so vulnerable with me, I decided to share some vulnerability back. And I asked, so, how was I? And he looked back at me now, and he said, you know your stuff. And then he reached out his hand to pat me on the shoulder in that singularly grandfatherly way. And said, but you have plenty more to learn. Yeah. And then, no more words, he just put this wool plaid trilby on his head, nodded once, and left. And I watched him walk into the rainy night, the red and blue neon of the store reflecting against his pale skin, and I realized just how much I had yet to learn. 15 years later, I still have more to learn. Every time I teach a workshop, every single time I learn more about people's fears, their anxieties, their joys, their turn-ons. I've learned never to assume what someone has already lived through before they come to my workshop or what they are there to learn then. I have learned that if I try to pretend I know what somebody's into, I'm probably gonna be fucking wrong. But perhaps more importantly, whenever I'm with a new partner, I remember that I'm there to learn. To play, sure. To indulge, of course. But to listen and to appreciate. Sometimes, when I put on my strap-on and I take that long, sexy walk from my dresser to my bed where my partner will be waiting with a bottle of lube and a smile, I think about Peter and how sad I am that he never got to enjoy with his spouse what I do with mine. But how happy I am that he gave himself permission in small ways when he felt safe enough to do so in a world that wanted him to be ashamed and humiliated and alone. And because of that, he lived a richer life than he would have otherwise. And that's something that I always hold on to, Peter's bravery. He reminds me to be brave, to hit on those people that terrify me in their hotness, and to give myself over to learning more about my body and my heart and my mind and the bodies and hearts of minds of my partners. I never want to be calcified or cynical. And I always want to commit to listening and curiosity. Because above all, for the rest of my life, I know that I have plenty more to learn. Thank you.